Hello. Today we are talking with a dear friend of mine, Christine Stump. I came to know Christine through a business coaching group, and we've become what we call business BFFs. She's the one that keeps me accountable to my goals and helps me remember that I can't do it all. And I can't begin to tell you how thankful I am for our connection. Christine is a yoga guide, home yogi, and founder of Healing Yoga and owner of Badlands Yoga in Albuquerque, New Mexico. She researches, designs, and adapts yoga practices for women over 40 and small groups using the principles of healing yoga and it's so good. In her personal life, she hikes, she listens to cozy mysteries, and she works in the forest around her home, which is beautiful, with her husband and with her fluffy big dog named Goose, who, by the way, is the sweetest dog. Today, we'll be talking about personal yoga practice. Or home yoga practice. So this is the type of practice that you do at home, and it's more consistent rather than just only in a classroom setting, although I'm sure classroom settings can be part of the practice. Home yoga practice has more focus on what you need personally. It's more to achieve your personal goals for movement and wellness. And anyway, so you may be asking, why am I interviewing a yoga guide on a channel devoted to hosting dinner parties? So, well, as you may know, that part of my story for why I am curating tablescapes is that I have felt led, I believe divinely, to make more connections with people, with both the people in my life now and with new acquaintances. I actually long for this because I believe one of the best ways to connect is around the dinner table. And I am struggling to host the dinner parties that I long for. So this conversation is about no longer putting off the things we love to do. And we know that in a way we're called to do. And there's a very common universal inherent struggle for humans that rises up in us for the things we love to do. And these things would benefit us. So yoga practice, as some of you may know, kind of falls into this dynamic. So Christine, I've given my take on what home yoga practice is, but I think it would be better to hear you define it. And I'd love for you to tell us what you and your business offer to help someone cultivate a home yoga practice.
Oh, thank you, Susie. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me on your channel. I'm truly grateful. And the times that you have laid a table for me and other people in our presence have been some of the highlights of convivial experiences in my life. So I'm honored to learn from you in that respect and to share our common passion for practices and for home yoga practice. To me, home yoga practice is separate from any led practice where you're watching a video, listening to an audio, or being in person led by someone. Home yoga practice for me started in my late teens and early 20s. So this was back in the early 80s, early to mid 80s. And there wasn't, kids, there weren't yoga studios on every corner, and it was not taught in gyms. And there was one woman out on the edge of town who taught yoga. Oh, wow. And I couldn't get to her very often. And so I went to the library and checked out books and read the instructions for Trikonasana, triangle pose, and then tried to get into it and what's the top arm supposed to be doing, right? And that was sort of my entree into, you can figure this out, right? It's a conversation between the form and the content being our experience. And I found fast forward, I'm in my 30s. I moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico. There is a yoga studio, a bike ride distance from my house, and it's in the gym. And life is beautiful. And we talked about this on the interview that you did on my channel, about home yoga practice. You're in class, and the class is going at a certain pace, and there's this sort of energy that carries you along, right? And you want to be a part of that energy. And sometimes you're like, wait, I wasn't done figuring out what my top shoulder was doing in triangle. Like,
Right.
I need some more time with that. Or, oh, I've got all of this energy, right? Something big happened, something scary happened, something whatever. And I've got energy that I just need to work out. And my teacher is trying to get me to go really slow, which is, so those lead experiences enrich our vocabulary, our sensory vocabulary, our movement vocabulary. But then when I take that home and I try to reestablish what was that feeling in my shoulders in Trikonasana, right? Oh my goodness, that wasn't it, right? Ah, that was it, right? It's like this little laboratory for light bulb moments that tell me not just about my shoulders, but about my heart and my mind. And that's what home yoga practice is to me.
So good. And how do you offer coaching and help with people learning this?
So I started teaching a home yoga practice workshop from just one sheet almost 20 years ago now. And it has evolved into a 60 or 70 page workbook and a 4-hour basic workshop. But so that's one of the ways. There's a home yogi community where we talk about our practices, the highlights and the lowlights, because you don't have the light bulb moments without the fumbling through the boxes moments, right?
True. Yes. Yes.
They're either side of. We live in Albuquerque and Cedar Crest, New Mexico, on either side of this mountain, right?
Yes.
And along the top of that mountain is a beautiful trail. It's along what we call the crest. And I feel like practice is like walking the crest trail, right? On this side, there's light bulbs. On this side, there's fumbliness and darkness, but you don't get one without the other.
That is so beautiful.
Well, thank you. And I also, I do one-on-one sessions with people, and then I have small group classes. So I practice in the tradition of Vini Yoga, founded by this guy named Desikachar. And the phrase of his that I think sums up a lot of his wisdom is, you fit the yoga to the person and not the person to the yoga. Which to me means, even when I'm teaching, I go in with a plan every time, right? Like, oh, I'm pretty sure that we're going to blah and back bend and forward fold and whatever. And then I talk to the people and find out what kind of day they've been having. What are they sensing in their bodies? Is their shoulder acting up? If they sleep funny? And then sometimes the whole plan goes out the window because you don't fit the people to your plan. You fit your plan to your people. And I think our home practice is an opportunity to do that.
Most definitely. Gosh, it's so beautiful, the work you're doing. I mean, changing lives, I happen to know. And yeah, that is so beautiful. I organically came to my own personal yoga practice. And because you're my friend, I actually adapted the practice based on little nuggets you've given me, right? Or at certain times I've done certain different things. And like you said, there's another YouTube video that talks about that on your channel. So, okay, so let's talk about practice, like the ways we can actually change our perspective to train
Mm,
our little monkey minds to get on the mat. And
mm.
because I suspect there's something in this that I can use and my listeners can use in our effort to actually put on a dinner party and have some connection around the table.
Yes. So I think the principles of a practice really are sort of universal. And I think one of them is connect to your motivation at a deep level. And one simple way to do that we facilitate in the home yoga practice workshop is connect to your motivation at least 3 times. And that's can be as simple as, why do I want to do this? Why do I want to get on the mat? Why do I want to host a dinner party May 17th or whatever, right? Why do I want this? Do I want it? Oh, and then a whole journal can come out of it, right? Oh, am I doing this because I think it's someone else wants me to? Oh gosh,
Mm.
is why do I want that? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there, oh, wait, but I want to do this because I value my connections with these people. Oh, that's going to look like a different dinner party than if I do it for the reason that my girlfriend, husband's brother's boss wants me to, right?
Right,
A
right.
different dinner party. It's a different
Yes.
practice, right? And
Right.
then ask at least 3 times, okay, why do you want that?
Oh,
Why do I want, oh, I want to connect to these people. Okay, why do I want to connect to these people?
yeah.
Maybe they make me feel a part of me that I don't always get to feel. Oh,
Mm.
and why do you want that? Right? And at some point it becomes like a 3-year-old and you got to give it up. But why? And this isn't a new idea. It wasn't new. I think it was John Acuff maybe who wrote Question Behind the Question.
Mm.
Uh, it wasn't new when he wrote it. But
Right.
this idea of like really sitting with, okay, and why? Why do I want that? And that can actually take some time, right? But that's an exploration. That's a yoga all its own.
Yes. I think
Having a
uh,
conversation.
I'm sorry. I'm excited about this. Just about the time you said it sounds like a 3-year-old, I was like, this sounds like a little kid. Why? But I love the digging down. Why? And a couple of things I wanted to say is like, sometimes it's also just asking, what do I want my future to look like? What do I want these relationships to look like 5 years from now?
Yes.
That is so good. And the other thing too is this type of motivation. They have that phrase, don't should on yourself. You're not hosting this dinner party because you should have time with your friends. It's there's real meaning there. There's that's really great. And yeah, and to get yourself on the yoga mat too. Why are you doing this?
Right.
Right.
And I also feel like it also honors that, even for your yoga practice, we have a whole collection of reasons, and some of them are pretty superficial, right? Like I want to tighten my butt up can be a reason, and that's a legitimate reason to do things in your
Mhm,
life, right?
mhm.
Okay, why do I want that? Well, because I actually know that if my glutes are stronger, my knees will be better. Oh,
Oh,
okay. And why do you want that? Well, because then I can hike easier and I can get down on
mm,
the ground and play with my grandkids easier, right? And so I think it's so important to get away from the judgment mind, get away from, is it good or bad? None of our motivations are good or bad. They're just, it's what we feel.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Right.
And then why do we feel that? And why do we want that? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say you own both of those. I just did a journal entry about why I wanted something, and there was like this column which was superficial, or or feeling based, and maybe some not great feelings, and I want this because of revenge, or and but then there were good, yeah, they just are. I love that. There's not a judgment, but
Yeah.
but it's good for us to see clearly and know why we're doing what we're doing. Yeah.
Well, and when we can own what we're feeling and what we want, we can choose how it manifests in our life.
Yes.
And when I can own that, you know what, that superficial goal, I actually do want that. Okay, well, then I get to choose an activity that manifests that I enjoy, that fits in my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have to do planks for core if I hate planks. I can look for other things, right?
Yes.
And really taking ownership of, okay, this is my experience. And the greater context is that a yoga practice is a container for a constant conversation with our bodies. And our bodies are a home to our wisdom.
Uh, uh, that melts me. And a dinner party is a container for connection.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and another principle that I think is easily transferable, at least it was for me, is when I'm helping people to create their own home practice, I encourage them to start with the minimum time that's going to feel satisfying to them. In fact, we ran an experiment once where the whole experiment was you just went into your space, you rolled out your mat, stood at the top of it, took 3 breaths and rolled it back up, right? So that's like a minimum viable yoga practice. It turned out that the people who did that and 11 days, we had a whole lot of reasons for that. This was 12, 13 years ago. Most of those people, the people who I still talk to today, still have a home yoga practice. I mean, how cool, right? So you start with like the smallest part of it that you can sort of see your way clear to right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that plants a seed, and it starts just like plants get their roots in, and then they start kind of making space for their roots, right? They break apart rocks.
They do. Oh my goodness.
We
Right.
plant these seeds.
Oh, yes. Yes. You helped me in my home yoga practice with exactly this idea, right? I mean, I actually started my home yoga practice because Brene Brown was telling me to take 5 minutes a day to just sit still, right? And then I started stretching, but yeah, you really helped me with this too, that it's just there's it's just taking that small bite, right? Just showing up. Maybe it's a sun salutation, maybe it's just one little thing. And yeah, that does develop. And so with the dinner party, with hosting your friends, right? Maybe it's not dinner, maybe it's just dessert and coffee after an event or something. Like, start small. Love it. Love it.
Well, and you've helped me with that both in business. We've been working our way with a time management sort of system that I think has really, your reflections on that experience have helped me see small intentional actions build up, right? And
Right.
it's the awareness overarching it. And you helped me with dinner parties, right? I realized, oh, you know what? I actually have a lot of the things that I thought I didn't have. And and I can just express myself and put them together the way I feel like doing today.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Right.
And it's those realizations that this is not only a self-expression, but a conversation that's unique to the participants.
Yes. Yes. Because you're
It,
unique.
yeah. And it frees us up to have the meaningful experiences with ourselves on the mat and with one another over the table.
Oh, yes. I love how those just, when we started this conversation, I wasn't really sure how it was all going to come together, but oh my gosh. Yes. Yes. Truth is truth. And you can speak it. I love it.
It
Okay.
arises.
Are there more steps to the basic
Yes.
outline?
So yeah, so the first step in the home yoga practice workshop is really getting in touch with your motivation. And one of the tools that we use for that is I have this pages long list of feeling words. And I have people go through and like, we spend about 15 minutes and they just circle all the ones that jump out at them, right? And they usually have like 27. And then do
27.
those like group around a few, right? And so we have
Mhm.
exercises that cull it down until it's 1 to 3 words. And then we create an intention out of that. And it's a very specific intention called a sankalpa. And that's a Sanskrit word that literally probably is most closely translated as a vow, right? But that sounds very heavy in Western language, right? And it
Right.
also feels like, oh my God, I'm taking a vow. Like, I'd better get this right.
Pressure. Yes.
It really, so the formula for it is it's a positive statement in the present tense about yourself. So we end up with 3 feeling words like, I am safe, strong, and capable.
Mm.
I am flexible, strong, and open, right? Whatever the 3 words end up being. And then there's a process in yoga called yoga nidra, in which you can work with an intention. So that wraps up the motivational section. And then to start up, so the second section is, okay, I've done all this like touchy-feely, pie in the sky, philosophical reflection. Okay, what do I do? Right? I've rolled out my mat. What am I going to do? So
Yes.
we take those feelings and translate them into postures.
Mm.
And this is where I really start seeing light bulbs come on, because the first thing that often comes up is, I don't know what any of them are called, right? Because most people who just go to a yoga class or 2 a week, if I say Setu Bandhasana, that doesn't mean anything, right?
Right.
So then we start talking about a couple of principles. One is, do you remember the shape? Like, could you show it to me? And about half the time they're like, oh yeah, it's the one where you're like this, or
Mm.
right, or they get up and they show me a warrior 2,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay, so who cares what you call it, right? And so now I have clients everywhere. So there's this one woman who calls this one pose shark that I think is hilarious and lovely, and so that's what we call it when she's in session. That's
Oh,
shark pose.
oh, love it.
And when people start making up their own names for the postures, they connect to them in a different way.
Yes.
And then there are really 4 classes of shapes. And so there are back bends where the front part of your body is a little more open than the back. And for instance, like an upward facing hands is technically a back bend because this is extension.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and it can be all the way to a full wheel back bend, right? But but if you think about how do back bends make me feel? I can tell you what we're taught in yoga teacher training programs, what books say. But we do a few back bends and notice how does that make me feel, right? Because that's what matters. What's that feeling? And then there are forward folds. In general, forward folds make people feel slightly calmer, more inward. But again, what's true for you? And then there are twists. And those are generally thought to be good for digestion and elimination. But then, so let's do a few. What are the feelings that come up for you? What do you love? What do you don't not love? Right? So we have back bends, forward folds, twists, and inversions. So an inversion could be downward facing dog. It can be legs up the wall, or it could be a handstand, right? There's this huge breath. And so once we have those feelings, let's say one of your words was strong. Okay. What's a posture that makes you feel strong? Warrior two.
Warrior two. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So then we're going to design a small practice around that. And so we use the ritual structure, which is also the structure of a story, right? There's an opening and a warm up, and we kind of get all the parts on the table, right? And there's an opening to a dinner party. We welcome people in, or maybe the opening is for the setup. And then we start welcoming people in. And then there's this sort of pinnacle where knives and forks are clinking, glasses are tinkling, people are asking for more water, bowls are being passed around, or maybe it's more formal, who knows?
Yes.
And then there's a resolution down to dessert, maybe, right? And then there's a closing.
Right.
And it's the same thing in a yoga practice. So I encourage people to have sort of their standard warm up. It could be as simple as get on the mat and do cat dog, right? And let the cat dog be like really improvisational, particularly if you're doing it first thing in the morning. Like really look at it as just moving your spine and shoulders and hips.
Yeah.
And then evolving from there into the warrior two finally. And then after a warrior two, what helps you sort of feel like you're coming back home? Maybe it's a downward facing dog. And then scaling it back down, and the closing. We talked a little bit about this on the interview on my channel. I always say it's not yoga without shavasana.
Yes.
And that rest really helps to wrap it up in a bow. So then at the end of this section, okay, so what do I do now? We start with a feeling, we translate it to a posture, and I help you design a practice in that section. The idea isn't that you have to do that practice every day, but that you're kind of learning how practices evolve.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the final section is about how do you establish a habit?
Okay, before we get to that, I do want to talk a little bit about, because what you were describing with that beginning, like just that ritual, right? And I was getting ideas like, so if your word is laughter or right? Or that you want from this party, right? You
Mhm.
know, maybe it's a silly game. Maybe, it might not have to do with the food at all. It might be the after part, right? Where you really hit that, this is dinner, and then we're gonna do this, right? Or maybe it's uh, uh you just the connection after, like doing the dishes, right? This is why,
Oh,
this is one of the reasons I'm not a big fan of paper plates, is because doing the dishes together is like a connecting time, right? Like just that
mhm.
that participatory thing. So maybe if one of your words is interaction, right? Like so
Mhm.
that you're or yeah, or shoulder to shoulder kind of vibe,
Oh,
right? Rather than across the table. That can be worked in. So I can, yeah, I really love this because I can see all different kinds of, like, those maps are going to look different of where everything lands when you're planning a
yes.
dinner party. And really just having that in mind. Um, the best dinner parties are where the host knows what needs to happen, right?
Mhm.
Because we all need to be led a little bit in these kind of situations, right? And I just, yeah, before you moved on, yeah, I just wanted to express my enthusiasm for that idea. Both in, yeah, I'll be using this for my yoga practice too, but like for the dinner parties as well. Yeah, yeah.
Well, and I
So
can imagine, like, if my word is laughter, that might translate into some food choices, right? Or we may like
totally
have one of those question card games, maybe not the dirty one, but like
right,
a
right.
question card game, and like and then let that go, right? Because I think, again, just like Sandia Crest is like right on the edge. Actually, it's not that precipitous, but
Yeah,
imagine it's right on the edge.
right, right.
And like on this side is there, in order for experiences to feel safe and nurturing and creative, there has to be a containment. But then we also
Mm,
crave the spontaneity,
right,
right?
right, right.
And so, what facilitates that? And I think
Yes.
one of the keys is having a plan and being
Mhm.
willing to throw the plan away.
Yes, yes, yes.
Like it
Yeah,
has served its purpose.
right, right. You're a hostess that knows what needs to happen, but is open to what
Look what,
is happening.
yeah,
Right? Maybe one of your words was laughter, and you were, and but gee, one of your guests showed up and had horrible news that day, right?
right.
You're taking a different path, just like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and I really feel like this is also, so back when in my prior life, in my prior profession, I was a paramedic. And as a paramedic, it sounds super exciting, and it can be. There are some moments. And a lot of it, like everything else in life, is a lot of hurry up and wait.
Mm,
And you end up being there for moments in life that aren't emergent but are important. And I used to call it, half my job is being a hostess.
oh,
It really, so, and I do think half of most jobs is being a host or hostess, right? It's just showing up and being present
mm,
and holding some space. And I guess the reason I brought that up was just, I don't care what you're doing. If you're a street sweeper, you show up, and then what unwinds, but it's our sense of practice, it's our sense of continuity over time, our
mm,
commitment to that motivation, to the meaning and the connection that
mhm.
allows us to hold the space.
Right, right. And keeps it familiar for those around us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, familiar and safe. Yeah. Love, love. Okay. Sorry to interrupt. I was like,
Not at all.
oh my gosh, let's stop here.
It's the essence of conversation.
It is. It is. Okay, so you said next is to create a habit,
Yeah. So the
which we were
final,
just talking about. Yeah.
yeah. So the final section is how do you create a habit? And one of the reasons, so yoga is just one of many movement practices, right? There are other esoteric practices, maybe we could call them, like qigong and even karate and all these sorts of things.
All right.
But then there's also like a gym practice, right? There's lifting weights and there's aerobics and all this stuff. What makes yoga different? The thing that I think really has kept me engaged with yoga over the long haul, as you know, I also lift weights. I also have an aerobic capacity practice. I hike.
Mhm.
I do lots of things. What's kept me engaged with yoga is that there's not just one way to be, right? If I come to the mat and I woke up feeling bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, there's a practice for that, right? I have my sun salutations and maybe I do some of the jumpings in it. And maybe I do there's a vigorous practice. If I come to the mat and, oh, this kind of aches and I feel tired and, oh, I feel tight, there's a yoga for that. Yin yoga is perfect. Yin yoga is low and slow. You take 2, 3, 5 minutes in a pose, right? And if I'm just wiped and I need to really just kind of be comforted for 5 to 15 minutes, there's a yoga for that. It's restorative yoga and yoga nidra, right?
Right.
And so that's part of how you make it a habit. You make the date with yourself, and then you keep it by being with your body in conversation, even if the conversation, not all conversations are great.
Right. Oh, that's good. That's good. My body's not happy with me right now. Yeah.
And sometimes it just feels dull. But can we show up for the dullness? And like, oh wow, this is how I feel right now. And I am going to be with myself in this feeling and do my best to release judgment. Right? Because we end up avoiding feeling states, body states, because we feel like they should be different. So can our practice become a place where we set the time, the place, and the intention, and then we fill it with what needs to be there rather than our predetermined thing? And so that's sort of the overarching principle. And then some of the details are that you choose an appropriate time for you, right?
Reach. Yes. That was
And
key
that
for
could be the right time of day,
me.
or it could be like, I don't plan an hour-long yoga practice every day because I don't have an hour at 6 a.m. every day, right?
Duh.
Sometimes I've got 5 minutes. Okay. So how do I honor that? So choosing an appropriate time of day and length of time, and then honoring it, right? So if I say I'm going to do 15 minutes on a particular day, it's important that I only spend 15 minutes. I learned this the hard way over and over again, actually. Don't spend an hour and make yourself late to work, because then you're less likely to do it the next day because you had this awful feeling, right? Like, oh, yes. I gave myself that, but it cost me this. Give yourself the 15 minutes and be surprised about how great those 15 minutes can be.
Wow.
I'm always surprised with my 15-minute practices, right? Because I like an hour to roll around on my yoga mat. And I get a little like, oh, disappointed. I only have 15 minutes today. Best practices, they're short. I leave knowing what I wanted to do next, right? So there's a thread to pick up. And it really does change the tone of the rest of my day.
Yeah.
So creating a space that you associate with yoga. So even if I'm very lucky, I have a room, but not everybody does. So maybe it's a corner of your bedroom. Roll up your yoga mat and leave it in the corner so that that corner means yoga in some way, shape, or form, right? And then somehow honor the rewards of your practice, right? For some people, I had one client who used to get the little squares of Ghirardelli chocolate, and she would put one at the end of her mat that she could eat after Shavasana. And it worked for her.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. I have other people who just check in with themselves once a week. Like, what are the things that I feel like my yoga practice brought me this week, right? Just acknowledge those things. And then setting up regular intervals for checking in. I like every 2 months, you have on your calendar a check-in. And I can imagine translating that into dinner parties, right? So this is for me. I'm sure there are people out there for whom planning the most elaborate, exquisite dinner party with Curate Vintage Co. tablescapes and chandeliers would be ideal. For me, I have to work up to that. I want a small tablescape.
Yes.
And a candle, right? So pick the size that fits in your life.
Right.
And make the space sacred.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. There's a sacredness about the table.
Yeah.
Right. There really is. Yeah. I recently found out how emotionally attached I was to the family dining room table. Like it is a sacred space, and honoring the time. Gosh, that looks like honoring your own time and planning it, right? That you don't have to go down a rabbit hole and spend hours and hours and hours, right?
Right.
Owning your own time and planning it, and then also owning, I mean, like honoring your guests' time, right? They're spending time with you, right? And so yeah, just kind of having that sense of this is how long this needs to be, right? And you can make that connection. It doesn't have to go into because I think that's a big part of what hinders us is we have these get-togethers are so big in our mind. It has to be dinner. My guests, I'm going to a dinner party. I have to get a hostess gift. I have to wear whatever.
Yeah.
I ran across something years ago about they're called dirty dinner parties. And basically it was like young couples with young kids that were like, look,
right,
we are showing up in whatever we're wearing that day, right? We're making it simple. There are no hostess gifts. We just need to get together, right?
Yeah, this is the gift.
Yeah, this is the gift, right? Yeah, and making that a practice to make it contained, like you said, right? Where it's yeah, and then also being able to show up and say, okay, this is what it is, right? I have a plan, but maybe I'm not in charge of my steps. Yeah, that's really, really wonderful. And then also the reflection. something you sent me before this interview sparked an idea. You said something about keeping a journal um, regarding your yoga practice. What a beautiful heirloom to have a dinner party journal where you took time after your dinner party and just wrote what happened and who was there. And I mean, your grandkids could probably publish it. It's just, if they wanted to, but like, oh, how beautiful would that be? And it would
Oh
make you
my
think about
goodness.
what you wanted to do differently. And it would also make you think of like, what do I want more of? Oh, like our calendar audits. When we in our planning for our business, we do calendar audits. It's like more of this, less of that. It's the same.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So that could be really, really wonderful too. Um, yeah.
And it really, so to me, part of what makes something a practice instead of an event or a goal, right? So
Right.
I'd rather have smart habits than smart goals. Not
Yes.
that goals are important, but it's, again, you show up with your plan and you be willing to light it on fire, because it's the connections and the people that matter.
Yes.
You need a container. And so one of the lessons of yoga is that we have a mind, of course, and our mind uses emotions, words, sentences, and pictures to organize things.
Mm-hmm.
There's something that's aware of all that, though, right?
Yeah.
And you can call it awareness, consciousness, spirit, soul. There are lots of words for it, but it's this sense of something that's independent of the particular contents,
Yes.
that is spacious and containing. And to me, a journal is exactly that. And your idea about a dinner party journal, where maybe you make your notes as you're planning, right? Like, oh, I need the carrots and I need the parsley and the lentils or whatever. And oh, I want this pattern for the plates. And I want to make sure so and so sits next to so and so or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then afterward, the reflection, that's like that's the long story, right?
Right. Right.
It's the,
That's the observance.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. So many good things. I just can't express uh how great this was. So thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thank you for having me.
And also you were very generous in sharing this structure for a successful home yoga practice that you teach. That was very generous. So I'm looking forward to reporting back to you about you are my accountability partner. If I actually implemented some of this to host a dinner, host my dang dinner party. One quick thing before we leave, tell me about a dinner party that you hosted that really stands out in your mind.
Oh my gosh. It's like it's this melange of so many, but
Mm.
so the most recent ones, we moved into the house where I live about 3 years ago now, and we have a beautiful kitchen, but not a big dining room area, right? The room that is they told us was the dining room is like it's my study, but it's behind a wall. It's just not what I I love having people in the same place where the food is, right?
Yes. Okay.
And so when we had you over for dinner, that was one of my favorite experiences, because I wanted to create a feeling, and it was my first one of my friends' dinner parties in this space.
Oh,
And because I was having you over, I thought more. You introduced me to the word tablescape. I did not know that was a word before I met you.
I don't, the spelling check still tells me it's not a word, but whatever.
Whatever. And so I really paid attention to all of the details. And so that is one of the most meaningful dinner parties I've ever had. And it was small and it was intimate. And it was very special to me because I had a heightened level of awareness. And it was really joyful.
Oh, it was wonderful. It was wonderful being hosted by you. And I remember when you were talking about having me over, you expressed a little bit of angst about, I don't know if I have the things. And I heard you today say, I realized I have the things, and you did have the things you needed. Yeah. And yeah. Oh, I'm happy that that's the one you chose because it was meaningful to me too. And yeah, so good. So where can anyone listening find you? Like I'll put information in the video, of course, but can you tell us quickly where they can find you?
So the quickest way is badlandsyoga.com. It's BADLANDSYOGA.com. And then my
Okay.
handles are at Badlands Yoga across the platforms.
Okay, great. Oh, that's so good. So, oh, thank you again.
Thank you so much for
Namaste.
having me.
Yeah.
Namaste.
And remember, everyone, today is a good day to sit together. P.S. Isn't she the best? Like, am I not the luckiest girl to have someone like Christine to talk to every week about my business goals? I I expressed how grateful I was, but I can't express how grateful I am for her. So I really, really hope that you will, especially if you're interested in the yoga, that you will go visit her. But I just wanted to say she is the best. PSS. You may have heard Gracie's shenanigans during that interview. Here she comes in here, wanting love, wanting to play in the dishes. Oh, it's just the way it goes.